Welcome to Kids Considered, where two pediatricians discuss children's health topics of interest to parents in a podcast with new subjects considered every episode. I'm Dr. Lena Vanderlist.
And I'm Dr. Dean Blumberg.
And we're both pediatricians at UC Davis Children's Hospital in Sacramento, California. So we spent part one of our discussion about screen time use, talking about really young kids, so that 0 to 5 age range.
For this episode, we are shifting gears and advancing to older children and teens with a specific focus on social media use in teens.
So let's talk quickly about the 6 to 11-year-olds. And I don't want to glaze over this age group because they are really still equally addicted to screens and media. But this is an age where you as the parent still have a lot of control over their schedule and access, and many of the same principles we discussed in the last episode still apply.
Yeah, so in this age group, many kids do not have their own cell phone, but will likely start having schoolwork on the computer, and this will add to their screen time exposure. So most organizations, like the American Academy of Pediatrics, consider this okay. So academic work on the computer is okay. But then they classify actual screen time, times on screens outside of time for academic activities.
Right. We know at this age, so the 6 to 11, kids are more rule-based thinkers, and they would likely really benefit from sitting down with you and coming up with some rules and priorities around screen time for you and your family.
Many kids start to love YouTube and video games at this age, but these platforms can also allow for easy access to potentially inappropriate adjacent content and displacement of other crucial activities during this developmental period.
Yeah, so it's really critical that parents get familiar with parental controls, not only on things like restricting time limits, but also how to disable certain features that might be inappropriate for young children, like open networks or some of the chat features.
Parents should also consult sites like commonsensemedia.org to help vet age-appropriate content.
And make sure that screen time never takes the place of physical activity or good sleep at night. My favorite thing is when I see kids in my office and the parents report very little screen time because between school and homework and chores and sports practices and, cello lessons, there's no time. And so maybe they get it on the weekends. And that is exactly what we want to see in school-age children.
This is also a great age to start talking about digital safety and privacy, as well as online advertising.
And create a family media use plan, which we have linked on our website. It's an awesome tool for families with kids of all ages. It allows you to sit down and have an open conversation about screen time priorities, when screens are going to be used, what are the screen-free areas of the house, and consequences for violations of those rules.
Interestingly, in this school age group, the American Academy of Pediatrics does not provide any specific time limit recommendations for screen time.
Yeah, that's right. So as an organization, it acknowledges that there's going to be differences between each individual family and child, but they always say that it shouldn't take the place of good sleep at night, so at least 9 hours, pro-social activities, time spent with friends, family, extracurriculars. And there should be consistent limits, so whatever that is at your house might look a little different, as well as age-appropriate content.
Now let's get to the meat of this discussion for our late middle schoolers and high schoolers and get to what parents really want to know, which is, what is the best age to allow their child to get a cell phone?
Yeah, such a common and such a hard question to answer because it really does depend on your specific child and their needs. For example, are you a 2-household family and your kid really needs to communicate about drop-off and pickup? Is your kid really involved in extracurriculars that involve a lot of coordination, like where are you going to be today? Who's picking you up? What's the carpool situation? Those may be reasons to get a device earlier. The average age for children in the United States to get a smartphone is 10, which is kind of mind-blowing. But the recommendation from many child health experts, tech executives, internet safety experts would be to wait on getting a smart device until your child is at least 14 years old.
So, if you're not getting them a smartphone, then what are you getting them? Something like my first cell phone, which was like almost as big as like a shoe and was an actual telephone. That's all it did was like dial numbers and receive calls.
Well, yeah, no, you don't have to go back to the old the dinosaur age. Um,
Uh-huh.
there are some awesome smartphone or watch alternatives, and I don't even want to call them dumb phones because honestly, they have everything you would need at this age and they look pretty cool. A lot of them look similar to something like an iPhone. And most would include things like voice or video calling, text message, location tracking, but no access to apps, the internet, browsing, games. Honestly, I'm thinking about getting myself one of these. It's very tempting.
So, we have a link with some of these devices on our website.
So now we can imagine how hard it must be for your tween or your teen to ask you every day for a smartphone and to talk about how all of their peers have one. But parents, this is why we need to band together on it when it comes to deciding what is right for your kid. And we want to consider a lot of different factors.
But mom, it's not fair. All my friends have a smartphone. I'm the only one in my group that doesn't. That makes me so uncool.
I know. It's hard, but guess what? Like I tell parents all the time, you are the boss. It's really hard, but sometimes we have to do hard things for our kids because it is good for them.
So the nonprofit group Wait Until 8th has great handouts and recommendations around this topic.
So they recommend looking at things like how old is your child? Like I mentioned before, a lot of people recommend avoiding smartphones for kids under 14 years old.
And then take a look at how is your tween or teen doing with your current household screen limits. If there are already battles about screen time limits, it may not be the right time because this will just exacerbate that. And how are they at obeying other rules around the house? Since you'll want to set rules about age appropriate screen time use, you'll want to consider how likely they are to follow these rules.
And how are your kids' social skills? This takes a lot of practice. Like, can your child look an adult in the eye and have a back and forth conversation? Because I promise you, they're not going to get better at these skills once they're glued to their phones.
Mhm.
Also, on the opposite end, like sometimes kids that are from more marginalized groups or like children with neurodevelopmental differences, find phones helpful for social connectedness, or they are also just more interested in things like coding or programming. And so you definitely don't want to discourage their hobbies.
Mhm. Are you, as a parent, ready to responsibly manage your teen's screen time use? This on its own takes a big commitment to be consistent with rules and expectations, monitoring content, and continually revisiting these limits.
Yeah, one of the reasons that we support delaying the introduction for as long as possible is the data looking at teen use and negative mental health outcomes and long term impacts on executive functioning, like planning and attention, are really quite staggering.
Teens report an average of 7 hours per day on their devices, with 5 of these hours coming from social media apps.
Yeah, this checks out with my experience. I recently volunteered talking at a local high school about social media, screen time, and sleep. And I asked all the kids to write down, like, how much sleep did you get last night? And then what's your daily average screen time use? And it was like 6 and 6 or like 7 and 7 for all the kids, like sleeping the same amount of time that they spent on their
Wow.
device.
Hmm. Another thing parents of teens need to be aware of are the chances of sexting or sextortion.
Yeah, so sexting is the sending or receiving of inappropriate, sexually explicit images, videos, or text message, while sextortion is when online predator tricks them into sending them like nude images or videos and then might ask for something like money or more images as a way to keep them private.
Unfortunately, this is not uncommon in teens. Nearly 20% of teens have reported sending a sext, 35% had received a sext, and almost 15% had forwarded a sext without consent.
Ugh, yeah, it's cringy and it just makes you like your heart ache for these kids as a parent and as an adult. There have been about 3,000 cases of sextortion against minors that were reported in 2022, but we obviously know that many of these cases likely go unreported.
So it's so important for parents to talk to their teens about the dangers of sharing inappropriate photos of themselves online and to discuss the permanency of these posts and how they could be shared unknowingly with others.
Totally. There's also a risk of legal troubles associated with child pornography. So, the importance of reviewing all of these risks with your teen cannot be overstated. Another plug for some of these monitoring programs that can help you as a parent monitor for inappropriate activity on their device.
Once you decide that your teen is ready for a smartphone, what about using social media platforms?
So, of course, once you give into the smartphone, this is going to be their next ask, right? So, most commonly used sites do not allow minors to join until 13, but almost 40% of kids age 8 to 12 say they have used social media. So, there's obviously ways to lie, about your birthday and get around this. My usual recommendation with social media is to wait until 16 before joining.
There are many studies that show the detrimental effect of social media, and I think many of us have seen it in our own lives. In one study, girls who spent 2 hours or more on social media were more likely to report depression and self harm behaviors compared to those who used it less.
Another large study involving 3 different data sets found that adolescents who use social media for 5 or more hours a day were 170% more likely to be unhappy as compared to those who used it for an hour or less per day.
Another really interesting recent study looking at teen mental health showed that parental involvement seemed to play a role. 2/3 of adolescents in the study were doing well with their technology use and mental health. This group was called the family engaged teens, since they reported good communication with their parents about technology use. Their parents also had low levels of their own social media use. The smaller 1/3 group of teen participants had higher rates of negative health outcomes, such as depression and loneliness. This group of teen participants reported higher rates of social media use by their parents, as well as less frequent communication with their parents about their social media use.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? Because
hmm
a lot of times we're pinning this on the teens and we take less responsibility. Or the parent in the office with me is always like, they're always on their phone or like they're always looking at their phone. But then the parent's sitting there scrolling and like doing the same thing.
That's where they
Um,
learned it, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so I think that it just highlights the importance of us role modeling and speaking openly about this, because another study found that adolescents who had higher depression symptoms reported that their parents spent up to 8 hours a day on social media. Again, this reflects that our teens need us to be present so much, and these screens are taking us away from that, the ability to be present, and they're noticing it too, right? So I think that is a really important takeaway from this episode.
Once you decide your teen is old enough for social media, talk about your specific rules. Many parents use monitoring programs such as Bark, B-A-R-K, that can notify parents if there is inappropriate content and limit screen time amounts on different apps. Many parents will require that their teens' profiles are private, they are friends with their teen so they can monitor what is posted, and turn off access to direct messaging.
Yeah, more and more platforms are setting up controls, such as one called family pairing. This is a feature offered by the popular social media site TikTok. This allows parents to link their own personal account to their teens and restrict certain content as well as direct messages.
It's important for parents and teens alike to understand that these platforms are designed to keep you watching, to sell products. This applies to all of us, but it's more important for teenagers who are specifically still shaping their identities, and they have insecurities and questions about their world. If they hover over something for a half second too long, showing interest, fear, or insecurity, they're going to be drawn in deeper.
Yeah. So it can often hone in on content about beauty or like weightlifting, or if teens are struggling with mental health or their identity. I can't tell you how often a teenager has come to me now, like self-diagnosing mental health conditions because of things they've seen on social media. And while I love that mental health is becoming destigmatized and people are more open, it's also not great to watch videos about someone else's anxiety journey for 5 hours a day, right? Especially if you yourself are dealing with some of these things.
Yeah, so often these algorithms end in a stream of content that makes teens feel worse about themselves and their friendships. In the end, there's really very little that's social about social media.
Definitely. And I mean, even more so now, right? Like, I mean, I have always been a proponent of this, but now it's like I can't even see any of my friends on there. I ended up getting rid of it because I was like, I used to follow this, like, be on these sites because I would see my kids' babies and like, other friends. And now you're rarely even seeing that. You're seeing strangers that are like baking bread or like showing you their like dream kitchen that you'll never have. So there is nothing social about being with your friends and having your head down in your cell phone the whole time. Personally, I hope that there is some sort of reckoning around this in the next few years. I kind of feel like it's starting to happen now. There's been a lot of push here in California. High schools are restricting cell phone use on campus, which I think is amazing. I think there are definitely some benefits, but it seems to be these days to me that the negatives are outweighing the positives for young people.
Well, let's summarize this episode's topic.
So screen time use in older children is undeniably increasing and poses significant issues when it comes to sleep, attention, mental health, and safety.
The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends families ensure that they set consistent limits on screen time in this age group so that it doesn't take the place of pro-social activities, sleep, and homework, and that there be discussions on digital safety and age appropriateness of content.
And while there's no right time to get a cell phone, you want to make sure your child is able to follow consistent rules around screen time, has age-appropriate social skills, and you may want to start with a simpler device that just allows for texting and calling.
We highlighted some of the recent research around teen social media use.
And we reviewed that many experts across different groups are calling for waiting until 8th grade for a smartphone and delaying social media introduction until age 16.
And that reminds me of a screen time joke.
Oh, let's hear it.
What do you call a large reptile who likes to stir up fights on social media?
What?
An instigator.
That was a good one. I'm all, I don't know, I've flipped and I feel like I'm sort of anti now.
Yeah, I think so. I think your views have changed in the past 5
My
years.
views have definitely changed. I think, but I also think that the platforms changed a lot.
That's true,
and
too.
so it's hard to, and I think maybe just being in the office and watching how bad it is for kids, like anecdotally, with stories and like the mental health stuff, and just that no one can make eye contact with you anymore and they're all staring at their phones. I'm like an old lady. I used to be cool and now I'm like, yo, put your phone down and look at me in the eye.
Well, I think the one benefit of social media that's still true, we addressed this 5 years ago, but the issue of marginalized people who live, for example, in rural communities who can't connect with somebody similar to them.
Yeah.
That could be a real lifesaver to connect with people, outside their area, their geographic area, and to really connect and get support for things that they might be going through.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And there's so much educational content on there that teens have access to. Like if they are really into something, like you can find so much information. You can learn from the internet. You can do that. So I'm not saying that there are not benefits to all of the stuff, but it's just specifically social media, constant connectedness. And yeah, I don't know. I think the negatives outweigh the benefits right now.
That wraps up this episode of Kids Considered.
You can find more information on our website, kidsconsidered.ucdavis.edu.
Follow us on Twitter @KidsConsidered.
And Instagram @KidsConsidered.
If you have feedback on this show or topics you would like us to discuss in the future, we would love to hear from you.
Please call us. Our number is 916-915-3388.
Or email us at kidsconsidered@gmail.com.
Please rate us on iTunes or wherever you subscribe to your podcasts.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you will join us for our next podcast.
Kids Considered is sponsored by UC Davis Children's Hospital.